A rose-scented Santa Claus. Mrs. Claus doesn't bake cookies. She doesn't prepare any dessert at all, for that matter. Her husband eats enough cookies to last him 1 year on his journey around the globe. Instead, she cracks 5 eggs, 3 for him, 2 for her, spreads butter on toast, tosses a bowl of fruit for them to share, and prepares her husband's favorite, a mug of coffee with frothed reindeer milk and candy cane crumbles on top. It always gives him a nice boost before the annual Christmas soiree, which is hosted by the elves, forever adorers, kiss-asses, another might say, of the man in the red suit. This cup of joe will definitely give him a kick. The clock reads 5:35 a.m. He should be arriving soon, no later than 6, she hopes. If he's on time, their Christmas tradition can go on as usual. In the first 25 years of their marriage, she'd hear the reindeer and their jingling bells land on their cottage's immense sleighway at 6 on the dot. For the last 8 years, he was always 10, 20, even 30 minutes late. "Old age," explained the elder elf through the years. She scoffed openly at his comment. 65 was not that old. Last year, Mr. Claus arrived an hour late due to a highly rare reindeer injury. Plight, the Rudolph of the group. There were others with noses to guide the way, but Rudolph was the original, had broken a leg. Before he landed, Mrs. Claus was so distraught by her husband's recurring tardiness that she'd thrown the entire breakfast in the trash and dumped the coffee in the sink. 5:45 now. She should soon be hearing Santa's ho 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 as he slows his sleigh in the sky. She doesn't. But her anger is now water underneath a frozen layer of cool indifference. She grabs the coffee pot and pours 2 cups now, prepares his, then lays it on the pine tree-shaped coaster. 5:50. 6:00. 6:01. She waits at the table. At 6:25, Santa Claus lands. From inside, she hears the elves cheering, clapping, celebrating. No doubt they're all wearing their best elf suits, midnight black and made of pure wool, ready for the party that starts in 45 minutes. Mrs. Claus stopped going out to greet her husband 3 years ago. Old age and whatnot, she told the elder elf with a stiff, sweet smile, whose reply was merely an awkward smile and hesitant nod. Mrs. Claus waits at the circular wooden table on the chair that faces the door of their small cottage. Just a minute later, better to walk past those elves, lest they talk your ear off. The door opens, and in walks the man of the hour. Noel, known to her and some close friends, smiles. She knows what he's going to say next, because it's the same thing he says every year. Mrs. Claus deepens and roughens her voice to imitate her husband as he says, "I can't wait to shave this damn thing off." Noel laughs, and she does too. She still does love this man very much. Nothing, no one, could ever snatch that feeling away from her. Noel loves being Santa. She still remembers the pride on his face, mixed with shock and sudden nerves, when the elf jury chose him for the task. This was way back when he was Noel Fable, and she, Winterfrost, back when they'd only stolen a kiss or two and were too shy to hold hands in public. She'd never imagined she'd be Mrs. Claus, and certainly never thought about how their lives could look 28 years later. They selected him just 1 hour after Nick Claus had passed away at 75. It was, and had to be, a swift process. She'd wondered what it'd feel like if her husband died, and just 60 minutes later, people were lining up to replace him. She also thought about who it'd be. Perhaps Elliot Ryder, the young man who'd fixed up Plight's leg last year. She quite liked Elliot. He was the only one who was honest with her and told her that the only reason Plight would injure his leg, the others left unscathed, would be because he didn't want to land on a certain roof. Despite popular belief, reindeer are not loyal to the man with the bag himself, but rather the cause of Christmas itself. In fact, she too might say that she was dedicated to the cause, if need be. So why wouldn't he want to land? Elliot had asked her. She'd merely shrugged, because that was none of his business. She'd be replaced too, of course. If the new Santa had a honey, then it'd happen immediately. If he was single and ready to jingle, then later. But she'd be stripped of the name Claus and forced to move on. At least she'd get to keep their home and have a comfortable place to grieve. It was a quick and cruel but necessary procedure. Christmas didn't wait for anybody, and the North Pole was legally required to meet those children's demands. "Come sit, my love," Mrs. Claus says, patting the seat of the empty chair beside her. Noel obeys and moves closer to her. Before sitting, he leans in and gives her a sweet kiss on the cheek. The first time that Mrs. Claus smelled roses off his puffy white beard, she didn't question it. The third time, it had made her eyebrows furrow, but they'd had breakfast, and she'd moved on. The fourth time, suspicion came. Only confirmation followed in the next years. A perfume that didn't belong to her, that didn't actually exist on the North Pole at all, where there were only cinnamon, hot chocolate, pine, and other related scents. The tardiness and the incident last year only added to the pile of evidence. He threw in the logs and the kindling. Add a flame, and what else could you get but a fire? The scent now makes her knuckles turn white as snow against the mug's handle. "My favorite part of the day," Noel says as he finally sits. He reaches for the coffee cup, and Mrs. Claus only stares. with a smile that looks like a sticker someone threw on her face and stuck. It doesn't take one sip. He tells her about his night, skipping over certain details she imagines. Not that she wants to know. And together they eat. She finds that she has no trouble swallowing the eggs, chewing on the toast, even sipping her coffee. Not even when Noel starts slurring his words while talking about the best cookie of the night. She places the mug down with a soft thump as the slurs become choking sounds. She notices drops of milk on his mustache then. He looks at her with a confused expression, and those still gloved hands go to his neck. But Mrs. Claus doesn't move, not even when he calls out for a name that is not her own. The smell of roses is still fresh under her nose when Mr. Claus starts turning purple. Santa falls off the chair, and Mrs. Claus, like any good wife, screams and calls for help. I dreamed of heaven. There's a smell to death. And I'm not talking about the stench of rotting fat and escaping gases. It's the smell of death's presence. It changes the air molecules to make them sour. They slice your nose as you inhale, and they grate against your skin as you walk through its cloud. The effect lingers. The more bodies, the more intense it is, like a heat map of last breaths. There wasn't a pure atom in the basement. It was suffocating. I was sitting against the wall, my dead eyes pointed to the sky, and my dropped chin pointed to Earth's core. My hands were blue, and my face was pale. My legs were twisted in such an uncomfortable way, but there was nothing I could do. Literally. I couldn't even breathe because there was no breath to circulate, and my blood could no longer flow because most of it was on the wall. So it seemed that I would be uncomfortable for eternity. But what's new? Even when I used to lay in the most comfortable position on a bed of clouds and fat puppies, it would only take an hour before I was forced to move again. Comfort is only a distant hope, after all, occasionally swooping down to give us a kiss on the cheek, only to fly away again. It offered a good chase, at least, but now it's gone, and it's never coming back. I can see its wings flap and flap, but its image only shrinks. Goodbye, little bird, and so my legs will stay. I don't even know who these people are next to me, beyond being an undesirable, of course. I always thought it would be my wife or children. Hell, even a neighbor in their place. But who are they? I don't know them. I've never seen them in my life, except maybe a passing glance or so. And yet, here they are. No one would ever want to imagine their coffin being shared with strangers. It's not fitting, I'll tell you that. And who pulled the trigger? I didn't recognize any of them either. When a man is put in such a position as I, isn't the smallest, most bare minimum honor you could give him is to at least let him see a familiar face before the black veil is draped. Even a simple photograph would suffice. Does their cruelty know no bounds? And what a disgusting day for it to happen. A clear, warm week ahead without a cloud on the radar. Yet they chose the only stormy day as the day. The rapping of the rain against the basement window was incredibly distracting, and all I had to do was stand still. I can't imagine the ruckus for the men with the job, but alas, it goes how it goes, just as it always does. Nothing new, nothing new. When my consciousness expired, there was a very bright light, just as you're told that you would see. It was like I was tied to the nose of a rushing train that was exiting a tunnel. I wasn't scared. I was intrigued, I suppose, but weary. It didn't seem like the light was growing as you'd expect, but it was still clear that we were bound to collide. And so we did. I then entered a still ocean, hovering over it, as if I was sitting on top of a floating rug. I looked around, and there was nothing that rose above the floor of shimmering water, completely level. I waited for some sort of figure to appear, an angel or guide, but no one came. I was alone. There was a thick white fog, more of a cream color, actually, and it was smothering everything, especially the horizon. The sky was the same color. I suppose it was more of a calm mist than a fog, if that makes sense. I stayed above the water, simply watching the mist, and I found myself entirely at peace. There was no tension or wonder. It felt right, natural, ethereal. Then the day succumbed to a wicked night. Everything was dark and ugly. But something in me knew everything was there, just as it was earlier. The water danced in an invisible moonlight, and due to the darkness, it was no longer water, but an eerie liquid. For the first time, I became aware of the possibility that the liquid might touch me, and it was terrifying. I couldn't say why. It's the same experience as seeing a familiar item in your bedroom turn into a demon when the lights go off. You know what it is and what it isn't, but you have nothing to prove it. And so, it was a demon. I found myself on the run again, but the reins were still out of my control. I soared through the dark mist to a sort of cave with a light echoing from its depths. Yet this light was only an illuminance in its vibrancy and not color. It was blacker than anything else in sight. You could shine the most intense beam of real-world light into the cave's exhaust, and the darkness would devour every ounce of it. There was no overshadowing its power. I was slurped into this cave like blood down a drain, and when I woke, I was surrounded by 4 things. They were human in their shape and size, but their faces and direct appearance were revolting, like bloody brain matter paired with the sensation of swallowing a razor blade. It's impossible to convey their grotesqueness, and they were in pain. They were suffering. Whatever they were, I was lying flat on the cave floor, looking at them, all standing over me. They were studying me in teary-eyed horror. Just as I studied them, they were afraid and sad and grossed out. I was a brutal crime scene, and they were an innocent child. Their spirits yearned for an opportunity of hesitation, while their bodies functioned autonomously. They lifted me up like I was in a stretcher. Then they carried me through the cave, mostly keeping their vision to their path of travel, but occasionally sneaking a glance against their will at whatever I was to them. They placed me on a cold table and backed off, fighting themselves to sever the tie between their eyes and me. Then they were gone. All I could see was a wet cave ceiling. I knew a figure was next to me. I closed my eyes. It rolled its feet as it moved along my left side, doing seemingly nothing other than being present and busy. I don't know if it wanted me to open my eyes. It dared me to, but I would never. The ringing of complete silence was giving me the feeling of a terrible migraine. I couldn't relax because the figure was there, so I stayed alert and ready, as if there were some sort of instructions to be heard or questions to be asked. But there were none. No sound, no feel, only dread. Something was coming. Something was going to happen. It was racing to me. But there was nothing outside of the expectation of it to tell me. The figure paced. I didn't know what the figure looked like, and I would never dare to satisfy that curiosity. It wanted me to see it so that it could punish me, like a bully hovering in your peripheral vision, waiting for you to make eye contact so it could warrant abuse. But the figure, what abuse was in its arsenal? I was inflating with the shivers of dread, the heat of its vibrations cooking me like a bowl of popcorn. The figure was by my feet, my unprotected, naked feet. It wasn't doing anything yet, but of course, it was getting ready for something. Something big. I never realized how soft and sensitive the skin on my feet was until then. I expected the Lord to be here, but he wasn't. What are the rules if the rules I lived by didn't work? I don't even know if I had skin or a body or anything other than my perception. I would never open my eyes to see. If my skin was still attached, it must have shaken itself loose by now. Trembles of this magnitude would bring down even the strongest city. It's on my right side now. What's it doing there? Why there? My left side is empty, exposed, naked. There's fidgeting behind me, metallic clinking, shuffling. But it's delicate and gentle. There's no rush to it, like an assassin taking his time to thread on a suppressor. His mind is in the clouds, and his hand is on the gun. How could one smile in a time such as that? The figure isn't smiling, though, I'm sure. It's all business for it, nothing more. A freezing chill tickles my scalp, near where the figure is hovering. What is it doing? Wait. It left. There's no door to close, but some sort of barrier is now between it and me. It's gone, but I can still feel it moving through the cave, as if I have a map of its layout. I'm alone. My eyes will stay shut. I've decided it. I'm not risking it, not for anything. It'll come back. The figure, it'll come back without a doubt. It's getting something for me. I know it. But what? Or is that it? Is it done? Or will there be more? Has it even started yet? What is it? I don't know anything, but I know enough to not be ignorant. There's something coming. It's on its way. But why am I here? What is here? Does everyone go here? Oh, it's back. The figure is back, foreboding. It was all too much, really. The woman and the boy dragged their tired legs through the deep snow. Ahead of them, far off in the distance, lay the undulating, snow-covered hills where the log cabin they were heading for had been built many years previously. The two could picture in their minds a blazing fire and hot chocolate with little marshmallows floating on the surface. And it was this that kept them going. The boy, a young teenager, often had to support the woman and help her across fallen trees that hampered their progress. The woman was exhausted, and every few minutes she stopped, leaning heavily over her knees, trying desperately to catch her breath. The boy stopped with her every time, but his eyes kept traveling anxiously across the vast expanse of land they had to cross to reach their goal. Being younger and fitter, he didn't need as many breaks as the woman did, but he never complained. It was more important for him to bring the woman back alive than to force her to walk faster. They set off again, the woman hanging on to the boy's arm. The surface underneath them suddenly turned slippery. They had reached the frozen lake finally. There was still a long way to go, but at least there were no hills or fallen trees to navigate. The woman stopped again. Her breathing was labored, and she had trouble drawing a deep enough breath to regain some strength. She was crying from the exhaustion. The boy knelt down and held her. His face was worried and concerned. His hands shook somewhat as he gently patted the woman's back. A man walked past in a sideways manner, like a crab. He waved at the pair and smiled. The woman stretched out a hand towards the man, imploringly, and the boy gave him a surly look. But the man just smiled again and continued through the deep snow. He wore only one snowshoe, which explained his strange gait, but it didn't seem to hamper his progress. He flattened the snow with his snowshoe-clad foot and hardly sunk through the snow at all. With the other foot, the woman looked at the flattened snow and then looked up at the boy. He smiled at her. At least there would now be an easier path for them to use. The woman straightened up and, sensing renewed vigor, pulled the boy to his feet. They hugged, took each other's hand, and started walking again. Ahead of them, the man continued his crab walk, humming a monotonous tune that sounded more like a low rumble than anything else. He turned his head, saw them walking behind him, and motioned for them to follow, nodding his head encouragingly. As the man forged ahead in front of them, the distance between them and him grew. The man was walking unnaturally fast, considering the conditions and his unconventional gait, and the boy grew anxious. He tried to walk faster to keep up, and the distance between him and the woman increased unrelentingly. She called his name, but he seemed oblivious. He had his eyes firmly on the man, who was now barely visible far ahead of them, and did not stop when the woman needed a break again. She called him feebly, but she had no strength to raise her voice. She cried again, cursing her tired legs and laboring lungs. Once more, she bent over her knees, trying to catch her breath. She wanted to scream. She wanted to beg the boy to wait, but no words could be heard. A flutter on the wind, a change in the vibrations another human being causes when they disturb the airflow, caused her to look up. The boy was no longer visible from her vantage point, bent double over her knees. She straightened up quickly, her heart beating faster. Where was the boy? Squinting to look in front of her, she suddenly saw his head pop up, arms flailing, and then disappear again. Her heart fell into her stomach. He had gone through the ice. Finding a strength she didn't know she had, the woman ran. The snow was deep and felt like syrup. She screamed in frustration and then called the boy's name. As she got closer, she slowed down, walking fast but carefully towards the boy. He was bobbing up and down again, waving his arms, but he made no sound. The cold water had robbed him of his voice, and his open mouth, so poignant in his horrified face, only mimicked the sound he was trying to make. Suddenly, he disappeared again, and only his hand was sticking up over the snow. The woman, no longer trying to be cautious, threw herself down on the ice and found his hand. Seconds before, it would have disappeared under the water. She felt the boy grabbing the hand, and she pulled, the adrenaline and fear giving her more strength than she had ever had before. The boy's head appeared again, He looked straight at the woman, and there was a panic in his eyes that scared her more than anything else. She noticed that there wasn't much room for his head, and with a jolt of fear, she realized the fissure in the ice was closing up, and fast. The boy's head disappeared under the water again, despite her holding on to his hand, and the hole kept closing. Now, there was no way the boy could get his head through the hole to draw breath again, and she screamed in fear and panic. With her free hand, she started pounding on the ice around the hole. The ice was too hard, and her frail beating could not even chip away at the surface. Keeping a firm hold on the hand that still gripped hers convulsively, she tried bashing a hole in the ice with the heel of one boot, but the ice would not even crack. The boy's hand started losing its grip on her hand, and she wailed in desperation, stomping harder on the ice, standing up to add weight to the pounding on the ice. She lost her grip on the boy's hand, and it slipped below the water, the hole finally closing inexorably around it with a sucking sound. Far away from the location in her dream, the woman woke up sobbing, sweat moistening her forehead, and shaking from head to toe. A pain in her chest so intense it brought tears to her eyes. The woman tried taking a deep breath. She was moaning, and her heart was beating so rapidly it hurt. Next to her, her husband was snoring loudly, completely oblivious to her plight. This was nothing new. It would more than likely take an earthquake to wake him up at this hour, and she didn't need him anyway. She gently pushed the blankets aside and slipped out of bed. She had to make sure he was safe. The dream had been so vivid, so real. Tiptoeing across the hall, shivering slightly in the cold night air that permeated the house, she arrived in her older son's bedroom. A soft snoring could be heard from the room. As she neared, a quiet meow greeted her. Looking into the room, the lamp-like eyes of their cat Brandy were staring back at her, and the animal meowed quietly again. Letting her breath out, she hadn't even been aware of holding it. She tiptoed over to stroke the cat gently. "Good girl, you stay with him. Keep him safe for me." Looking down upon her teenage son, his mouth open and his wavy hair in disarray around his peaceful face, she felt her throat constrict slightly, and she had to swallow hard to stifle the moan that had almost escaped her mouth again. The dream was still so alive in her mind, and the sense of foreboding was making her eyes water, her chest aching so much she was afraid it would burst open. Wanting desperately to wake him up just to hold him, she instead stretched her hand out, stroking her son's forehead gently before retreating out into the hall again. Feeling compelled to check on her younger son as well, she continued down the hall to the third bedroom. He was sleeping on top of his covers, his little thumb securely lodged in his mouth. She could tell he was cold as he was curled up in a fetal position, and she carefully tugged the blanket out from under him, covering his little body and tucking it in around the sides of the bed. There was no point in going back to bed now. She was wide awake, and in less than an hour and a half, she would have to be up to help the kids get ready for school. She tiptoed past her husband, still in his bed, snoring loudly, to grab her bathrobe, and then snuck downstairs to make a cup of tea. Sunlight was forcing its way into her kitchen when she arrived back downstairs, penetrating dusty corners and pushing through a curtain of tiny dust particles that had been stirred up as she grabbed a tea towel to wipe the cup. And she sat down at the kitchen table, carefully sipping a steaming cup of Earl Grey. She still felt cold inside, shivering slightly, even as the warm liquid made its way to her empty stomach. The image of her son's head disappearing under the ice in her dream, still so clear in her mind, it was making her shake her head repeatedly, as if to rid herself of an annoying fly. She was wringing her hands, moaning quietly every time she saw the hand disappearing under the ice in her mind's eye. Would she ever be able to forget this dream? Little tiny clicks on the kitchen floor told her that Brandy had decided to join her in the kitchen. The cat looked up at the woman as she rounded the kitchen island on her way to her food bowl, but seemed entirely intent on wanting to satisfy her hunger for food before satisfying other needs, such as attention from her human owner. And she beat her regular path right over to her food bowl without stopping. The bowl was empty. Accusing feline eyes locked into hers. Brandy sat down, looked back at her bowl, and then up again at the woman. It was obvious that the cat was asking for food, but the woman, who was still feeling faint from her nightmare, seemed oblivious. A soft meow mingled with a purr escaped the tiny mouth as the cat stood back up again and sauntered over. Wrapping herself around the human legs, she began a relentless meowing until the woman finally surrendered and got up off her chair to feed the cat. That's when she saw it. Next to the canister where they kept the cat's food, there was a pile of unopened and unchecked mail from the day before. On the top, underneath a blue envelope, apparently sent out by Publishers Clearinghouse, she was probably about to win $5,000 a week for life, was something white. She realized that she was looking at a picture of snow, and with trepidation and horrific foreboding, she pulled the catalog out from under the envelope. It was a magazine on vacation cottages in northern Maine. Her husband had been canvassing for this vacation for months and had obviously ordered the catalog. And on the front was a picture of a rustic-looking cabin with snowdrifts lapping the windows. In the background, a frozen lake could be seen. The woman caught her breath and felt her knees buckle. Next to the cabin, locking eyes with her from the picture, stood the man from her dream, smiling benignly, holding his hand out towards the cottage. In his other hand, he was holding one snowshoe. Mercifully, darkness enveloped her, and she escaped. For a while. It was all too much, really. They're coming. They're coming. The whispers carried by the wind. The repeat of words started yesterday morning, from the moment my bare feet touched the wooden planks of the wrapped-around porch. The corn swayed slowly. Anticipation, knowing they would soon pick up their speed. Sounds of the horses shifting around the fields, anxiety fueling them. They knew just as well as I did what was to come. The clouds in the distance were dense. The light around the house shined bright for now. The blanket of clouds would take that away. Soon, too soon. The pitter-patter of little feet sounded from behind me. A hand wrapping around my finger, giving a slight tug. Her bright blue eyes would be boring into me. Those beautiful eyes she adopted from her father. If only he was here, they wouldn't be coming. They would leave us be. They would keep their distance. They knew what the consequences were, but no contact, no letters, no information of where he was or when he would come home, left us in the foreboding shadows. The war was bound to come. Unfortunately, we knew that. The day the papers came, he looked at me. The look of knowing all too well. He would be called upon, leaving us to fend for ourselves, while he went God knows where, to defend the great land we call home. The last letter received was over a month ago now. We sent one in return within the week. Concerns the officers would come bringing devastating news filled the house, weighing the air down. Another tug released me from my trance. I looked down, mustering a smile as best I could. Guiding her back into the house, setting her up in the chair for breakfast. Eggs, toast, and fresh bacon from one of the sows lay in front of her. Coffee was the choice for me. Hunger was gone. I felt nothing of the sorts. Thirst controlled me. Coffee, water, and milk satisfied me for the time being. A bang sounded outside. My eyes snapped to see through the fogged window from grime. Something else to add to my list of things to do. The dust and dirt picking up from the fields created a layer. A goat was taking time to practice butting again, lining up to go again with one of the poles surrounding them. The clouds were closer. Too much to do before they would be here. Too little time. Another tug. This time, my dress. I felt the hole in the side tear a little bit more. Another thing to fix around this place. I turned. Her shoes were on her feet, and mine were in her hands. The plate behind her was polished off, and the cup with remnants of milk sat beside it. Her head cocked to the side. A nod returned. Sliding my feet into my boots, we headed out to accomplish the never-ending tasks plaguing us. Night fell quickly, and the clouds were almost here. By morning, they would be on top of us. The sounds of the restless animals in the barn through the open window next to my bed. Creaks of the old house moving with the wind called out in various parts. The nerves, the knowing of what's coming, getting to me, all while she slept peacefully in her bed. No worries in the world, aside from making sure the animals were happy, and her father was okay. The adolescent hopes and dreams occupying her mind. Mine was screaming at me. Too many thoughts, too many fears, all flicking through, ready to explode out. The hope of tea helping the pain and pressure, all while it did nothing at all. It usually did not. But I lived by it, as my mother had too. Lessons she taught me, guided me quite frequently. That being just one of them. They're coming. I shuddered with the wind as it brought that news. Constant reminders. I wanted to scream out. I know all too well. Instead, I stayed quiet, fighting to go to sleep to earn some peace. Peace would not come, however. My dreams would be filled with thoughts of them coming. My husband, my child not getting everything they need. The idea of peace is just that. An idea, a hope. There was none for me. The sounds were pounding by the time my eyes opened. Light barely came through the windows. The clouds were here, and so was the shadow. My feet pounded, carrying me out onto the porch. The corn stalks now looked like they were laying down, the wind rearing its ugly face. They're coming, they're coming, they're coming. The words pounded into me. My eyes watered, dirt flying into them. I felt my way to the sink, rinsing them out as best I could. Turning, she was behind me again, head cocked to the side. Quickly fixing oatmeal, she ate while I worried. Opting to give her time off today, I set her up with her favorite things in the living room. Not before getting her dressed in her Sunday best. No hair out of place, and a bow matching her shoes. The wind howled outside. They're coming, quickly. I needed to get everything done, quickly. Forgetting my shoes, I headed to the barn, multitasking, not without dropping things. The grime now covered me, just as it did the windows. Hurry. You must hurry. Stepping out of the barn, a cloud of dust was nearing. Pounding of horseshoes coming down the way, carried with the wind, just as the words did. They're coming. Minutes. A matter of minutes. And they would be here. The dust rounded the drive at the far end of the field. My feet ran me into the house and to the bathroom. Grabbing a cloth, I wet it down and scrubbed at my flesh. the grime coming off. Slowly, it felt. I was running out of time. Finally, getting the last mark off, I put my Sunday best on, running my fingers through my hair. Standing in the doorway, she was beside me, watching the cloud of dust get closer. They're coming. The wind howled again. They're coming.